Have you ever been led to do something by God that you felt was very difficult for you to say yes to? Well, as I was reading this morning, I read in Genesis 22, the very familiar story for some of you. Maybe some of you haven't heard of it, but Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. Well, Abraham loved his son very much. As a matter of fact, he and Sarah had not been able to conceive until they were in their old age. And it was promised to Abraham that he would have descendants so many to count like the stars in the heavens. And the descendants were going to be Israel, the nation Israel. So he was promised that. So when they did have Isaac, and for God to ask him to sacrifice him for him, you would think that Abraham would fuss about that. He would debate maybe with God, like we do sometimes in our minds. Maybe we don't do that audibly or verbally to the Lord, but we do it in our minds a lot of times when we feel a pull in a direction or a push in a direction that we know that God is leading us in. But Abraham was obedient. The word says the next morning after God asked him to do this, he got up, he loaded up his donkeys, he got 2 servants to go with him. He loaded up enough wood and everything for the offering, and he took his son. His son obviously didn't know that he was being taken to be sacrificed, because when they got to the bottom of the mountain where the sacrifice was going to take place, Abraham told the servants to stay at the bottom of the mountain. He also said, which I found interesting, he said, "We'll be back. We'll be back. We will be back." So that tells me that Abraham knew in his heart that God was going to do something bigger than what he was originally told. Isn't that always the case? When we step out on faith and do something that we know God is telling us to do, He comes through better and bigger than we can even imagine. Everything works together for our good, and it did for Abraham and his son Isaac that day. He took Isaac to the mountain, and as they got closer, Isaac, the boy, asked him, he said, "I know we have all the supplies for this sacrifice, but we don't have a sacrifice. We don't have a lamb." And Abraham said, "God will supply." So there again, he spoke it again, twice. He spoke in faith. Even though he continued to go about being obedient to what God had asked him to do. He takes the boy up there. He lays him down. He even straps him down on this altar. And as soon as he did, the angel of the Lord came and said, "No, do not strike this boy, for God has supplied the sacrifice." And there in a thicket, is called in the Bible, was a ram. God had brought that ram to be sacrificed. So just like Isaac was spared being the sacrifice, we are spared because Jesus Christ came that we wouldn't have to die. All of that came about for our good. And it's so much better than we can even imagine to have that sacrifice given in the place of us. And that's where God led me this morning. I hope y'all have a wonderful and fulfilling kind of day.